Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to discuss very briefly a brief history of machine translation. And this is going to be our third topic in this course. Uh, Before we go into the chronological order of machine translation history discussed in this very brief article, let's ponder upon the phenomenon of creativity. It is a very strange phenomenon, and especially the human brain has been very innovative in this regard. But the question arises: what are the characteristics that that makes or make human brain think in terms of creative ways? We have little knowledge of the human history or nations, and we have seen at a certain span of time, one nation does not tend to be creative, but others they become more creative, and likewise. And this substitution of creativity here and there in different geographical areas of this planet or in different civilizations and different nations is very interesting and a topic of research. We have seen in the recent history that after the European Renaissance, the Western countries they are more creative than the other nations, and they are providing more advancement in terms of technology, in terms of scientific discoveries, in terms of making our human life more easy and providing more facilities in different segments of human life, like medical technology, transport, and so on. Uh, if you ask me, my dear students, what are the basic characteristics that make a certain nation at certain point of time to become more creative, I would give you maybe only one thing, maybe one big characteristic which is, in my view, very essential to be creative. It is thinking freely, making your brain think freely, openly, bluntly. This is my, we can discuss this point in inside the classroom, because the topic is this question is very significant question, is a basic question and needs more examples and more explanations. So for the time being, I just leave these questions for you people to think and move on to the next slide. Uh, as for the history of machine translation is concerned, we have various indication in religious texts. We have also indications in mythology, especially the in old Indian mythologies and in the Greek mythologies, and the legends that describe a state of humanity where only one language is spoken. We have the examples, as I said, the Greek mythologies. We also have a reference of one language among all the humanity at a certain point in Bible, and the famous biblical story of Shinar, which was in Babylonian civilization, a city which was constructed after Tufan Nuh, and people tried to build a big tower to reach the heavens, skies, and then they were punished by the god, and this tower was destroyed, and people living in that area or in that place, they were the only human being at that time, and they were sent to the different parts of the planets, and hence we have different languages. But before that, there was only one language. Quran also talks about the oneness of the humanity in one of its human famous verses, which is "Kana nasu ummatan wahidatan," as the people were one nation. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ وَمُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ, and then Allah sent prophets, giving them good news and warning them of the consequences of their bad actions. So this idea, one way or the other, is there in Quran as well. Although Quran refers to the variance or the difference in languages is one of Allah's signs. واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. Surely the difference in your languages and your colors is a very clear sign for those who are scholars, or for those who do research, or those who know. So the point here is that oneness of humanity, or one language, has been a constant thinking in various civilization, in religious text, and so on. But when we come to the 17th century, as we all know that the 17th, 18th, and 19th century, and the subsequent century as well, the 20th, and so far the 21st as well, these are the centuries marked with the Western contribution in technological advancement, scientific and technological advancement. At the 17th century, we see big names, philosophers, those who were talking about the various phenomena of human life. One of them was the languages, and Rene Descartes, or Descartes, is one of those philosophers who talked about the possibility of one language which can be used by all human beings. And we have also another interesting example, which is the language of Esperanto. And I hope you know a little bit of this language, because this was the idea was floated by one Polish scientist, medical scientist, and he talked about that there should be one man-made language which should be used by all the humanity to make the whole world a peaceful place. Because if we have one second language that is used by all human beings, that can bring us closer, more closer, and hence we will be able to understand each other in a better way, and ultimately the peace will prevail. Uh, the word Esperanto means the one who hopes, means there was a hope in the idea, and there was a time when this language spread in many European countries. But nowadays, I think people seldom talk about this Esperanto, or this language, human man-made artificial language. Uh, Developments in machine translation can be discussed in many ways, because if you read the various articles or literature or books about history of machine translation, you will find that the scholars, the authors, they have different set of categories. One is chronological order, what happened in the year so and so, in, let's say, from the year 1949, or even before that, and then 1952 and 1960, and so on. And other approach is based on the approaches, mean the how the machine translation systems are developed, what approach was used at a certain point, or at a span of a period 10 years or 20 years, and then the approach changed and the results also changed. uh, Another approach is that the history can be described based on individual or institutional contribution, where the individual contributions are discussed in details, or institutional constitution contributions, means the contributions by the universities are discussed in detail. And last could be the blend of these two, one of these, or two of these three, or all these three. What we have seen in this selected article is this one, that the you know the developmental stages of machine translation have been divided into 5 phases. The first phase is called the beginning, which is 1948 till 1960. The second is parsing and disillusionment, which is 1960 and 1966. The third one is the quiet decade, which is 1967 till 1976. The fourth one is New Birth and Hope, 1976 and 1980. And the fifth one is the 1980 and 1990, which is Japanese contribution, and sixth since 1990, the web and the new vogue of translators. Uh, I think there is a need to be corrected. The 5 phases, and these are basically 6 here. So the first phase is the beginning. These 12 years. In 1949, Warren Weaver proposed use of computers in translation. The idea was floated that the computer can be used for the sake of translation, and he used the term computer translation. In 1952, the first symposium entitled Conference on Machine Translation at MIT under the leadership of Yushwa Bare Hillal was organized. In 1954, Georgetown University, in collaboration with IBM System, they created a system with 60 sentences, Russian sentences that could be translated into English. You see, the core reason for emergence of machine translation or for this need was defense, because that was the time when Russia on one side and US and United States on the other side, they were of course in a kind of rivalry for taking lead, for of course taking over the whole world, and they needed of course advanced technology, and they invested huge amount of money to of course lead the whole world and to become superpower. In 1954, Victor Jung published the first journal on machine translation, and the journal name was Machine Translation. And that was the era where researchers, scientists, people working in this area, they made a big, very big claim that within 3 to 5 years, machine translation would be no problem. It means we would be able to we will be able to manufacture systems that would help instant and qualitative translation, quality translation, and quick translation for especially for the defense related institutions, for the armies. Early 1960s, now we move on to the next phase, which is the parsing and disillusionment. Early 1960s parsing is the only possible basis of research to advance the machine translation. Machine translation basically started with the translation of one word, means a dictionary, digital dictionaries we can call them right now. But then people of course found that the structures of the languages are very unique, so we need to go towards the parsing. And the parsing process was this, that it is the separation of the grammatical items, the clauses, and so on, and defining their role for the sake of translation. In a simple way, we can say a sentence should be divided into nouns and kind of noun, of course, the verb and kind of verb, and auxiliary verbs and adverbs, and so on and so forth. So that was considered prior to this period as considered a great advancement toward this direction. Uh, in 1961, of course, a new branch of knowledge was there, which was computational linguistics, a combination of linguistics on one side and computer science on the other side. And people realized that these experts in these two areas, they need to work together so that the effectiveness of the products or effectiveness of these programs may be enhanced. In 1964, the government of USA created a committee called LPAC, which is Automatic Language Processing Advisory Committee. And this committee started its work right from its creation in 1964. And the result was this, that they gave their report in 1966, which is known in the history of machine translation as LPAC report, a very notorious, very famous report. And the crux of this report was that machine translation is wastage of time and money. And the conclusion or the result of this report was that it was very negative. It fetched very negative impact on machine developments or projects on machine translation for a number of years. As I said earlier, and I want to link that here as well to this point, is very important because the governments were investing huge money in Russia and in USA for the development of machine translation system for the reason that I told you, for the defense reason, for attaining more power in this world, political power in this world or defense power in this world. But when they found out, or this report, actually, ALPAC report told the United States government that you are wasting your money and you are wasting the time as well, because we cannot have a big hope from these projects. With this, of course, because of the bad impact of this report and bad report given by the ALPAC, it resulted in this, the quiet decade in 19, almost 10 years. There was overall silence in the field of research in this area of machine translation. Although partial and small-scale efforts in USA, USSR, Canada, and some other European countries continued, but they were not very significant. Some individuals, some universities, they continued, but the government stopped their funding for these for such projects. In 1975, we have now entered into phase number 4, which is new birth and hope, almost 15 years. And we see that in 1976, Mateo system for translating weather forecast with restricted vocabulary and limited syntax of meteorological reports. I remember I discussed, or I mentioned this development, which actually the Canada, which started in Canada first, because the Canadian people, they have two national languages. One is English and the other is French. So they needed this kind of machine translation system. So they developed it in a very limited manner, and it was a success actually. In 1978, a system called Atlas 2 by the Japanese firm Fujitsu was they were able to create a translation system that translated from Korean to Japanese and vice versa. And we should also know that that was the time when Japanese had problems with the Koreas and the whole political history of that area. With this, we can move on to the phase number 5, which is 1980 to 1990, almost 8-9 years. And we see that the Japanese commercial companies, they contributed a lot during this period. In 1982, the Japanese firm Sharp markets the automatic translator DUI English-Japanese, and this translator was based on rule, and we will talk about this rule-based or example-based and other approaches for the development of machine translation. In 1983, NEC develops its own system of translation based on algorithm called pivot. Means this since 1980, the commercial efforts. Prior to that, we have seen efforts on part of the governments, on part of some of the universities, of course, through the state funding. But now, from here, we see that the The companies, they are also venturing into the development of machine translation systems, and we have seen that the Japanese, they took lead in this regard, and they set models for other countries in this direction. And in this direction, not development of machine translation, commercial machine development of commercial machine translation systems. In 1986, development of system PEN-C by Oki I3, which is a translator Japanese English based on rules on that approach. In 1986, again, the group Hitachi develops its own translation system based on rules, again the same approach, and then which is an approach taken by transfer. And we will talk about this terminology when in the next lecture. And it was based on HiCAT's Hitachi Computer Aided Translation System, again Japanese English, and of course vice versa. Since 1990, actually this is the explosion of machine translation system, the web and the new vogue of translators. More focus on other approaches of machine translation, and as I said earlier, it will be discussed in detail. More focus on other modes of MT, and when we say other modes, we are talking about speech to speech and speech to text and text to speech and so on and so forth. So it was the explosion of commercial systems and applications, apps. People started also preparing apps for certain purposes in certain areas for meeting their translation needs. In 1993, the project of C-STAR, which was Consortium for Speech Translation Advanced Research, and it was a kind of international cooperation and machine translation of the parole. Parole means the language which is actually used in the market, in the streets, among the people, in the field of tourism, and so it is a dialogue client travel guide by video conferencing. And the birth of C-STAR, one which dealt with 3 languages, English, German, and Japanese. And the first demonstration is seen in January 1993. In 1998, the marketing of a translator Reverso by the company Softissimo. And 2000, the development of system ALPH by Japanese Laboratory ATR. This translator, Japanese English and Chinese English, takes an approach based on examples, which is very different from the rule-based machine translation approach. The same translator was adopted by the European Commission in 1976 for the translation Japanese English. Currently, we are in version 14 of the translator. And this currently is a relative term at the time when the article was written. In 2005, the appearance of the first website for automatic translation like Google was observed. In 2007, METIS2 is a hybrid machine translation system in which insights from statistical example-based and rule-based machine translation are used. As I said, these are all approaches, and we have a separate lecture on the approaches, so we shall be discussing all these approaches in a separate lecture. In 2008, and we have some statistics, 23% of internet users have used the machine translation, and 40% considering doing so. In 2009, 30% of the professionals have used the machine translation, and 18% performing a proofreading. 2010, 28% of the internet users have used the machine translation, and 50% planning to do. So we have, after 10 years after this, guess what could be the statistics right now, and we are in 2020. In my view, now the statistics have very drastically changed and enhanced. If we say the internet users, I think even the number of internet users have increased tremendously in the total population. and the number of the professionals, those who are using machine translation, I think are more than 70% in the whole world. And it depends upon how they are using machine translation facility. If it is post editing related machine translations, maybe the percentage in is more than 70%, maybe it is 90%. You people have studied practical courses of translating and interpreting, and I'm sure you have used these machine translation systems for your class work, for your class assignments and projects as well. And of course the post editing was part of your work at the same time. And exactly, the professional translators, they are using these free online machine translation facilities and others as well at the same time. So the number or the statistics is on the boom, and this is very big change is for the usage of machine translation is concerned by the common people and by the professional. Your next reading assignment, students, is from page 112 to 21, two articles, Architectures of Machine Translation Systems, and then Empty Approaches, Issues, and Challenges. Go through them, get ready for the next lectures based on these two articles, inshallah. Because this lecture is very short, so we take this opportunity and I give you another practical exercise here: three-step machine translation comparison and analysis or evaluation. You will be given after this lecture or after this brief or uh, introduction of this exercise. There will be three steps. First, you will be given, of course, a page for doing this exercise practically. There are three steps. First step is read carefully. There is a source text with three machine translations provided to you. The second step is the collection of points for comparison, analysis, or evaluation. It is the same format which you have gone through earlier. The word level, the lexical level, the structure level, the fluency, and so on and so forth. So you will collect the points for your analysis and for your comparison. The third step, of course, is writing, preparing or summarizing your points and writing them on this page. Is summarized write-up of comparison and evaluation or analysis. And the remaining time for your class today is devoted to this exercise. And when you finish this exercise, of course, keep this page with you, and when I come to the class on Tuesday, inshallah, tomorrow, so we will discuss the output, the result, the learning that you have, of course, attained through this exercise. And of course, I will also try to create links among the missing points or among the points that you would raise, inshallah. Thank you very much. Take very good care of yourself. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.